something catastrophic happened to my family. It was such a crazy time for us that I debated whether I should even still go to college. I mean, how could I leave my parents to deal with this trauma on their own? It's a bit of a long story, so I'll just start from the beginning. We had a pretty sweet life. Both my parents had great jobs. My dad, Neil, was a private investigator, and my mom, Mandy, was a doctor. So it's not like we ever had to struggle. And it was always really fun when my school had those bring your parents to school events. And I could bring my dad and show off that he was basically a spy. Although now that I was older, I didn't envy him. He worked so hard. Recently, he was working on a very high-profile case, and he was spending every waking moment trying to figure it out. He always worked solo, but his boss gave him a hard time, and while working on this case, we barely saw him. My mom was also working a lot, even doing night shifts. It's not like we needed the extra money, so it didn't make much sense to me. Plus, she was exhausted all the time and getting quite snappy with me. It made me even more keen to get to college. I could tell my dad was nearing the end of his investigation because he looked way less stressed and had even started singing again in the morning. The end was in sight. One night, we were all sitting down the dinner table, which was seriously a rare occasion of late. My dad always kept his phone next to him in case his boss called, but my mom never did. In fact, usually her phone was hidden away deep in her bag. For some reason though, today she had left it on the table too. After we finished eating, my mom went to take the dishes to the kitchen and her phone started vibrating. It just said anonymous, so I ignored it. But then suddenly my dad picked it up and answered. I could hear the voice on the other end saying, "Mandy, thanks for all the extra work you've been putting in, but I think you can take a break now. Neil has almost cracked it. Thanks for keeping an eye on him. I guess he's not as hopeless as we originally thought." I didn't need to wait for my dad to reply because he didn't. He didn't even hang up. He just dropped the phone onto the floor and stood there frozen in place. I gulped. This was bad. This was really bad. Why was my dad's boss calling my mom? I recognized the voice straight away because he called my dad in his loud, booming voice all the time. I started to panic. My dad was visibly shaking, and then my mom walked into the room, saw her phone laying on the floor, and then, as she looked at my dad's expression of pain, she started stuttering. "Neil, I can explain. Please let me explain. It's not what you think." My dad didn't even give her a chance to explain. He just started screaming at her, calling her every name under the sun. I slipped out of the room and stood in the hallway crying. I've never seen my parents like this before. I didn't even understand what was going on. Was my mom having an affair with my dad's boss? No, that didn't make sense. Dad's boss had said, "Thanks for all the extra work you've been putting in." What was he talking about? At the hospital? I mean, yes, Mom had been working a lot recently. Then it all came out. What was actually going on? As I stood there in the hall and listened, I felt like I would pass out. Turns out, my mom had been working for my dad's boss as an undercover spy for the past 20 years. So, from before she even met my dad. The only reason my mom even started dating my dad was because her boss asked her to. He wanted to know if my dad would make a good spy, so he had my mom watch him and she would report back to the boss. I couldn't believe it. My dad was so angry. I heard cups being thrown and he was even crying. I never heard my dad cry. My dad was the hero who solved mystery cases. This couldn't be happening. The worst part was that my mom was only with him because of her work. Did she even love him? I couldn't bear to stand there and not do anything, but I felt helpless. What I heard next, though, made me furious. My mom wasn't even a doctor. She had been lying to us this whole time. Upon hearing that, I burst into the room and ran to my dad. I needed to be there with him to show him I supported him. My mom left that night and went to stay with her sister. We all needed time to cool down. That night, neither me nor my dad slept a wink. It was all so surreal. I was sure my dad would want a divorce now, and I couldn't bear it. The next day, Mom came home and kept apologizing for betraying both of us for all of these years. And she said that even though she started the relationship because her boss asked her to, she'd actually truly fallen in love with my dad, and that she'd do anything to make it up to him, even if it meant quitting her job. Well, that was the least she could do, my dad said. Both of them ended up quitting, and now they're starting their own business together. It took some time, but life has really slowly gone back to normal. Betrayal is not an easy thing to forgive someone for, but the least you can do is give the person a chance to explain before you decide what will happen next. Have you ever found out someone close to you was hiding a big secret? How did it make you